Well, to get more in-depth view of how the markets are trading today, I'm joined by Magnus Haystack from Brenthurst Wealth. Magnus, passion on the markets is something that's not coming through today. JSE rather flat today and no major movements. And yesterday we saw quite a significant amount of profit taking.
Just remember, we've had a fantastic 3 to 4 months. Markets have been running very hard. I mean, the JSEs at record levels or very close to that. We cannot expect it to keep on running. There must be some profit taking. And I think a lot of investors are looking at valuations and looking, oh, maybe we should just step back a little bit. We're waiting for some news from the United States about tapering or to what extent. So a little bit of caution is not a bad thing at some point in time. We've had a fantastic run this year.
Are you worried about tapering?
Yes, one should have, how exactly are they going to taper? Even the Fed is worried about it. If you read their website, they're starting to stress test a lot of their banks to see how they would react to increases in interest rates. And I think the IMF is looking at it, and I think the South African government is also looking at the impact of tapering. But what is very important is to know it's not a once-off thing. It's tapering, or the QE program has been going for 5 years now. And $4 trillion has been pumped into the world system. You cannot remove that overnight. It's going to be a 3 to 5 year phasing out. And so if the impact is going to be on markets, it's more likely to be over time. And I think analysts will be watching the big flows of capital in the world, dollar versus the euro, the yen playing a role. So look at the big moves. But the consensus seems to be that the dollar will probably strengthen over time in line with rising interest rates. Also, the US economy is powering ahead very nicely. There's a lot of money flowing back to the United States.
Almost sounds like an animal on drugs, Alec.
Totally.
The global economy
on
the stimulus.
We know the patient's like dead, but give him another adrenaline shot. Why not?
At some point, you've got to take it away, and that's. I think a lot of economists are trying to work out what's going to happen to markets, and every fund manager I speak to, they're not sure. They think this might happen or that might happen. And also the way that the Fed will announce the tapering and implement the tapering is also going to be very important. I think
you got Obama's pal now, even more of a pal, Janet Yellen, than Bernanke at least was from a different school. If Obama wants to get the next president of America to be a Democrat, then tapering is going to be rather modest. Many people think. Maybe, who knows when it's going to come. But those are big issues for far smarter minds than ours. You are a man who's done so well by advising your clients over the years to take money offshore. And if you have a look at where the South African rand is at the moment relative to other currencies, are you still in that frame of mind?
I was hoping you're not going to ask that question because, while you're ahead, you play to your luck. But 3 years ago, we took the view that the rand is too strong. At 650, even the government said it's too strong. I mean, we had Pravin Gordhan saying it's too strong. So, and there were other factors. So started moving out 3 years ago. At 10 rand, you're not going to see another 60% slide over 3 years. But it's a question of valuations today and diversification. One must remember that South African investors have been historically very exposed to South African companies. That's what they know. Those are the asset classes that have done very well for them. Now we're in a bigger world. And there was a reluctance until recently to move outside of the comfort zone of South Africa. So now people are looking for things we don't have in South Africa. Biotechnology, for instance, that's done 150% in the last 3 years.
But real basic stuff, like maybe ETFs on the S&P 500 or on the FTSE 100.
Anything.
Are you finding that your clients are, sure, it's hard to go and buy biotechnology, you don't know what's going to happen there, but the big picture, the big exchange traded funds, are they moving more money off?
They are indeed. I spoke to some of the big institutions this week who told me that their volume of flows going offshore has doubled in the last year compared to a year ago and 2 years ago. And we see it in our business. Clients are now saying, I need more offshore exposure. 3 years ago, we had to convince them they need offshore exposure. Now the demand is coming from the clients. And we need to caution them and saying, you're not going to get the same returns because your returns have been phenomenal. We're saying you're diversifying out of South Africa, point number one. My view still is that the rand is a weak currency and tapering would or could probably weaken the currency a bit more. And of course, we have other economic factors like business confidence at 20-year lows. We've got consumer confidence at 20-year lows. Economy not doing great. There's very nervous feeling in the market. So
where do you get the business confidence 20 years lows? We've been talking to the guys the last 2 days. No,
RMB?
No, they were here yesterday. They're
Consumer
like 4 years.
Consumer.
Consumer
Consumers.
confidence.
No, it's anyway. Let's look at that at another time. But you wrote a piece about the Fragile Five.
Yes.
And I guess from that perspective also one gets a bit worried about
the Fragile Five, we picked it up a couple of months ago already. I think it was JP Morgan, or Morgan Stanley was saying the 5 countries that have twin deficits, current account, budget deficits, they're the vulnerable currencies and countries. And they've been fairly spot on. If you look at the movement of global markets, especially emerging market currencies, so far this year, those Fragile Five have dropped the most relative to the dollar and to other emerging market countries. Other emerging market countries have actually gone up. South Korea has gone up. I think Singapore has done, it's a strong currency. So I think the world has figured out who's vulnerable and then are going for those countries. And unfortunately, as you well know, when the big money is against you, it's very hard to defend a currency.
We're like a cork on the ocean, aren't we?
We
Less
are
than
indeed.
1/2 of 1% of global GDP. If they want to hit the rand, good night.
And they do it. You can see it in small intraday movements, weekly movements. They do play the currency quite a lot. I think we're the 15th most liquid currency in the world, around about there. They know there's an active market in currency, and if they want to play it, they do play it. And they sometimes use the rand as a proxy for other currencies that are not as liquid, so they play it through the... So there's a big element of manipulation of our market and profiteering on our market.
Is that a good thing?
It's markets. Those are markets. Do not try and interfere in markets. Do not try and regulate those markets. The markets will crush you.
The Malaysians tried it. Others have tried it. Doesn't work.
Yeah.
And even the British tried it.
Well,
and George Soros made $1 billion, £1 billion, £1 billion. I'll get it right eventually.
£1 billion, but subsequently, that everybody forgets. 2 years later, he lost 700 of that billion when he tried to do the same against the yen. So never forget that little story.
Japanese are a lot more powerful than the Cons.
He lost 700 million 2 years later. And why I know that, I interviewed him when I was a journalist at the Star, when he was here in South Africa once, and he said, yeah, well, I gave some of it back.
Thank you, Mr. Soros, and thank you, Mr. Haystack.
Yeah, thank you very much.